Good evening and welcome to the show. My name is Sifiso Mahlangu. This is Polotiki live on channel 500 here on Galaxy Universal Network. I'm live from our studios in Midrand in Johannesburg. South Africa is in a state security crisis. Last week, the DG of State Security and the Minister, Ayanda Ndlodlo, went into collides with each other. The DG going to testify at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, and the Minister trying to stop him. Now, the DG, along with former Minister of Safety and Security, Mr. Sidney Mufamadi, leveled all sorts of allegations about various South Africans on the Zondo platform. Now, social media and commentators have been abuzz since then, calling this a state security nightmare because the state's affairs, secrets, plans, mechanism, plots and strategies have been laid bare for the world to see. Now, imagine the scenario. The new president of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden, appoints Mr. Rudy Giuliani as a chair of the commission. And then the CIA comes in and tells everyone how America works, about Afghanistan, about Muammar Gaddafi and everything else. That would never happen, but it's happening here. And so we discuss state security and the mess we find ourselves, our government secrets. Have they really been laid bare? Do we even trust Mr. Sidney Mufamadi? Now, Twitter has been ablaze for the last week, reminding many of us on who Mr. Mufamadi really is. Mr. Sidney Mufamadi is the gentleman who later investigated Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and a lot of those grey areas. Last week on the phone, I had a conversation with a strange gentleman who called himself Sidney's handler. We'll get into part of those discussions in this evening. I'm seated with my friend, writer and political analyst, Ms. Kim Heller. Kim's written an exciting book called No White Lies, Black Politics and White Power in South Africa. Now, my last show with her, reviewing this book, reached 90,000 views in 2 hours. That was really fantastic. So let's see if we can do better this time as we analyze the state security detail and we talk a little about the book. Ms. Kim Heller, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Lovely to be back here with you again.
Okay.
It's a real privilege.
Yeah, your book is doing so well, and it is the epitome of debate in South Africa. References to, no white lie, according to Kim Heller. Kim Heller argues, and we're going to talk a little about state security, but in reference to this, the book. And in one of your chapters here, you say, no one can destroy the ANC except the ANC. Is this what we're seeing happen at Zondo?
I think so, and that's a very good starting point, because we have to ask today, who is the ANC? And in whose interests is this party serving? Because it seems to bear no resemblance to the once upon a time Liberation Party that it was. And my book is about revealing uncomfortable truths. So I ask, in whose interests is this party serving today? And particularly in this new dawn, I believe that it's serving white interests, and that is very apparent. And as far as the Zondo Commission is concerned, I believe it's doing exactly what it should not be doing, which is focusing on a minuscule share of what it is calling state capture. But it's ignoring white power and the deep corruption that is done by white companies. For instance, let's take a moment to reflect on Brian Molefe's testimony, which has been blatantly ignored by the media.
Which was cut short because, Zondo had a COVID scare and he left. And by the way, Mr. Molefe is still under oath. So his testimony was cut short. And the next thing we knew it was state secrets being aired at the commission.
Absolutely. And I think what we're seeing now with the state security matter is an attempt to distract from the real issues at play, which is what Brian Molefe and others have revealed. But there's been a blackout on his testimony, which implicates the current president of this country, Cyril Ramaphosa, big time. But I have not seen media headlines in any other newspapers, apart from independent newspapers, speaking about the truths, the devastating truths in Brian Molefe's testimony, which are not based on a heap of allegations like other people, but on factual evidence, on documented hard truths, and yet we ignore that. But yes, Zondo has made a hasty retreat from his own commission. But the truth is, the truth itself cannot be quarantined. So it's going to come out. And I think that gives me hope. But you know, this book has been very interesting, and if I can reflect indulgently on that for a moment, it was released 8 weeks ago, and I've had the most phenomenal response. I've had to go into a reprint, and people are saying to me, thank you for telling the truth. We can actually see that you're reflecting on truths that this government, and particularly this administration, doesn't want to come to the fore, because I'm revealing the Rainbow Nation, and particularly the New Dawn, as a total big white lie, actually.
So in an attempt to shut Brian Molefe down, are we suggesting in any way that, Mr. Zondo cut Mr. Molefe's testimony down and brought in Mr. Jafta and Sidney Mufamadi to counter Brian's view and Brian's narrative? Because Brian went there and said, listen, Mr. Ramaphosa was the chair of Glencore when he was also the head of Eskom's task team to fight load shedding. And he was also the head of government business. So he didn't go there with basic allegations. He was speaking as Eskom CEO. But what do you know? The next speaker is Mr. Sidney Mufamadi, sort of countering that. Is it a shield? Is it covering the president? Is it to manscale him? Is it to cleanse him? Certainly those narratives are out there in social media.
Absolutely. I mean, Zondo vanished, and I did see a headline in one of the newspapers that 2 days later he was handing over an award to somebody. That was in I think the Sowetan newspaper. So I think this whole thing is a charade, because the truth is so devastating for Ramaphosa and his administration that they have to do a total blackout. And I mean, what we have, to use an analogy of load shedding, we have a leadership load shed in this country. There's no leadership.
We have a load shedding of truth at the moment.
Absolutely. And you know, I just wanted to make one point. You know, it's so fascinating in this book, because what I'm trying to focus on is white power, the pandemic of white power. We speak about COVID as the worst pandemic in this country. I don't think so. I think it's unfettered white power, which Ramaphosa and his administration is supersizing, to use a term from his McDonald's business as well.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the white voice is being supersized. And I want to say, you know, this book has been fascinating, because I'm saying it. People are saying, Kim, you're telling the truth. But I'm not saying anything that dozens and dozens of black people have not said before me. But because white people are so revered in this country, and the voice of white people is so important, is that I'm being celebrated. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm saying nothing new, but the black voice is shut out. And I think Cyril Ramaphosa is shutting out the real black voice. I mean, he's very interested in the white voice of white business. And in fact, suddenly, after Brian's testimony, he was seen on these commercial radio stations, one after the other, that afternoon. Do you remember?
In fact, it was on the very afternoon that Mr. Molefe on one side was dishing out the dirt on the president. The president was hosting editors at Luthuli House, doing one-on-one interviews with him. And I was following Mr. Molefe on my phone. And I was one of the editors who were set to have an interview with the president. And my first question to him was, Mr. Molefe has just implicated you in corruption. Are you going to appear before your Integrity Commission? Are you going to step aside, as others have been called to do? Are you going to appear before Zondo? And he said, yes, he's going to appear before Zondo, but we don't really know if that's going to happen. In fact, we later learned that he said he would appear before the Integrity Commission, but he wanted to appear with 3 legal representatives. Yeah. And perhaps that's you know what you're saying about the truth being shut down. Should we believe what Sidney Mufamadi said?
Well, the interesting thing is that the Zondo Commission seems to have been an avalanche of allegations. And Professor Siepe, and it's in this book, we wrote quite extensively at the very beginning about the Zondo Commission being not falling into the trap of being a public gallery of allegations and half-truths. But a year or 2 later, we're seeing that's exactly what has happened. So Mufamadi actually said, these things that I'm saying have to be tested. So he's bringing these half-truths, these allegations, these possibilities not hard facts like Brian has done. And yet the newspaper headlines are selling those as truths.
Yeah.
And it's a tragedy because this country has got no truth. I mean, I think I said to you last time, telling the truth in the new dawn is a blood sport. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And the voice is being shut out. But the state security thing is a fascinating situation because now we have people calling for the release of all these secrets, which compromise the nation. But yet, the same journalists are not calling for the truth behind the CR17 funding. Now, if there's not a contradiction, if there was ever a contradiction in this country,
that's where it is. That is it. That is it.
Exactly.
So the CR17 documents are sealed in the courtrooms. And SANEF is not calling on those documents to be revealed, but they're calling, independent media to come clean on one of the allegations by Mr. Mufumadi, who has got a sordid past, I might add. The attack on Winnie Madikizela Mandela through his hands. Should we trust SANEF? You raise an interesting point for me when you talk about journalism in this country. And SANEF makes statement after statement about how we should perceive the media and what South Africans should do. But SANEF is just an NGO. Should we believe them? And I know you're speaking as a former journalist yourself. Which role should SANEF play in the society? And do they have any credibility?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very big question, and it's almost the subject for a debate in itself. But we have to understand that media in this country largely is complicit in an anti-transformation agenda. They're complicit in pushing white power and making black politics the politics of distraction. So they are not an agent of telling the truth. It's a great shame that journalism in this country is just mere propaganda. But shame on the public for accepting so readily and without any critical discourse what is fed to us day in and day out. I mean, it's a narrative that has turned the former President Jacob Zuma into a villain. Is he a villain? Why, after 15 years, has there been no hard evidence of any wrongdoing? But it's a storyline.
And who was his deputy through the 9 wasted years? President Ramaphosa was the head of government business when, we hear at Zondo that the state-owned enterprises were captured and billions went missing. Where was the head of government business? He was sitting there as board chair of Glencore, as deputy president of the country, as chief of the deployment committee of the ANC. And now the president sits in some ivory tower and he says, I'm here to clean that country. Should the ANC and the NEC, for that matter, be inward looking to say, hey man, you were there?
Yes, but I mean, he's being protected by all means, and such is the force of white power. I think that black politicians are playing a silly game at the moment. They're so worried about the crumbs. For instance, let's take Tegeta. Brian Molefe clearly spoke about Tegeta only having 4% of the contracts at Eskom. Yet black people and black politicians are very focused about the 4%. They go after the crumbs. And what we see within that space is almost a black-on-black violence. We're fighting for these crumbs here and there. And, I want to say something very controversial. Perhaps if black people are just fighting for the crumbs, perhaps that's all they deserve. Because they're ignoring the 96% that is controlled by whites. And we must bear in mind that Cyril Ramaphosa is representing white interests, white power. And I did not choose the title of my book incidentally. It's called Black Politics and White Power. And white power in this country is omnipotent, it's omnipresent, and they have their man in the presidential role. So I don't even think the NEC is able to fight that. And to be very honest with you, these so-called RET people, to me, are quite useless. They think that politics in this country is a game where white monopoly capital know it's a war, and they are fully in control.
In this control, President Cyril Ramaphosa sits as the president of the ANC and now the president of the country. Perhaps people want to navigate towards the black cars because he appoints ministers. Is it not too much to expect the NEC to act, Kim? What is society doing? What is Parliament doing? The CR17 documents remain sealed. Mike Teke and all other funders of the CR17 campaign are getting tender after tender in this country. Load shedding is back. There's corruption on the PPEs. There's certainly corruption on the vaccines. And you know where it points back to? His friendships and his links, the links to the CR17 campaign. Shouldn't all of society say, I think it's enough? Why are we leaving that responsibility to the NEC?
Well, the NEC should hold him accountable. The branches should hold the NEC accountable. But I'm seeing very little resistance to all of this. And I think I do say in my book that what we're seeing in the ANC is a social distancing from its very own people. I mean, it's now, to me, fully in the hands of white people. And I don't know that it can be saved. Perhaps the people in the NEC just feel powerless. I do believe that we can't paint everyone in the ANC in the light of serving white interests. I think there are some really good radical fighters who have the best interests of the people at heart. But I think they're just being absolutely crushed by this machinery of whiteness, the machinery of white monopoly capital.
Should President Ramaphosa receive Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's report on the commission? He is implicated by various people, Mr. Brian Molefe in particular. Arthur Fraser wants to go there and you know, have his day at Zondo. Is President Ramaphosa going to fairly receive Zondo's report, a report that will implicate him?
No, not at all. But because we have a media that is complicit, we have a judiciary that is complicit. And the question that no journalist is asking is, why are these state resources being used to service the interests of a particular group of individuals and politicians? I mean, we are setting a dangerous, dangerous precedent.
Okay, let's go to one of your chapters written in August 2019, and you've written this with Professor Sipho Sepe, and you say, truth may be too ghastly for Ramaphosa supporters. What do you mean by that?
You know, we did a very interesting analysis because we actually are quite empathetic to President Ramaphosa, because we say he was never really a leader, actually. He was a media creation. And I mean, I've certainly later in the book compared him to a true leader like Winnie Mandela, who was made by the people, not manufactured by business or media. So we say, here is a man who was never an A-grader, who did very little as a deputy president, who created this myth of a messiah. And what we're seeing now is that his own supporters are going through what we call the 7 stages of grief. They're realizing that this is no messiah. They're denying it. They're going through anger. They're going through all the phases of grief as identified by a Swiss psychiatrist, Dr. Kubler-Ross. And so we're saying that they see the truth. They see it, but they don't want to see it. But the truth is that this man is not serving the ANC interests. Perhaps he's actually responsible for the final nail in the coffin of the ANC. He is not serving ordinary people. And it's too ghastly for people to see. I mean, investors have invested billions in this man. They don't want to face the truth. And that is why I think books like this are important, because it's challenging the master narrative. And pun intended on that. The master's narrative is being punted by media, by the judiciary, by ordinary people. And most of us don't even see that this is the case. So we have to. I'm very happy with what this book has done. It has disrupted the master narrative. It is starting to show the truths. And yes, I may not be the first person to say it. Scores of black people have said this before. But perhaps it doesn't matter who's saying it. The truth is that we are living in a lie. The Rainbow Nation is a white man's medicine. It's constructed to delay black liberation in this country, and yet we are intoxicated with this war cry of reconciliation. We must stop. One of the the chapters I speak about, I say it's time to shut down the Rainbow Nation. And it's not that I'm against reconciliation, but we have to put black liberation first, and we are not. And we are getting more and more away from that. The fact that state security is the secrets are being offered to the world. I mean, I think it's just, there's so much hatred for one man in this country, Jacob Zuma.
We've become a vulnerable nation.
Totally.
We have certainly become vulnerable.
But
and I use this,
yes.
this echo a lot, this preamble, this example to say, would you have Joe Biden or America say, well,
yes.
CIA, tell us what you do in foreign countries. How do you manage, you know, the US? Would we ever have that? And we never will. But it's happening here. You speak of the master's narrative, and this is an interesting one for me. Is SANEF, the Daily Maverick, the white school of political commentators, the Zondo Commission, ingratiating the Ramaphosa fallback, the Ramaphosa euphoria? Are they you know, Machiavellically working, you know, to honor or to upfriend this great man? They want us to believe in him. They're selling him to us and the world.
Totally. But I think at the underscore of all these people and all these bodies and these civil societies that are formed and never speak about poverty or landlessness, but go out and do marches against JZ. All these people are beholden to white power. So Cyril Ramaphosa is just an agent of white power. He's not that important. I mean, he's disposable. White people would choose somebody that they think will advance their interests. So they're probably already thinking of somebody else to replace him because he's not doing the job very well for them. He's not convincing. He's lost credibility amongst all sectors. So I actually feel sorry for this white mainstream media because they're selling something that can't be sold, actually. And at some stage, we cannot... propaganda won't work.
Was this a feeling you had many years ago when you worked for the Sowetan, or did you have knowledge of this, or when you worked in mainstream media, were you aware that you were a participant in the creation of the ideals of white monopoly capital as a white journalist practicing in South Africa? Did you have an awareness that you were building a pilgrimage for the glory of white capital?
You know, I think you're always naive and you want to go into media for social good. I mean, my first job actually was at independent newspapers, and I lost my job over revealing the level of racism in the company, and that was probably 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But working at Sowetan with the great Dr. Agri Klaster was phenomenal because we had real journalism. But even people like him had to be taken out of the system because their voices were too controversial. So there are very few voices, and we see voices being diluted, disempowered, disenfranchised because we are telling a different narrative. But I think we have a new way of communicating, and social media is very powerful. And people are not falling for the easy tricks of mainstream media. One of the most beautiful things that has happened to me with this book is that parents have been ordering this book for their young children. And they're saying, we're not getting this kind of narrative, even in our schools.
Yeah.
So my son is reading it. He's learning about why you're saying the Freedom Charter was a sellout document, why black people are still in poverty, that it's due to white supremacy. It's not due to lack of hard work or any other excuse that white people keep touting.
Yeah. Do you not think at any point that you tout radicalism too much? Do you ever say to yourself one evening, Kim, you know, pull it together. We have an opportunity to build a united South Africa, a democratic nation, Mandela's ideal nation. Do you ever say to yourself, you're too hard on Ramaphosa, you're too hard on Pravin Gordhan, you're too loud on the social media streets? Can we engage and work this country? Do you ever have that reflection?
Never for 1 minute. Because we're engaging as unequal partners, as black people and white people in this country. And you know, I'm ashamed to say that some people on social media are saying, Kim, you're helping to liberate us. And I want to like cry because I say, you know what, I'm the oppressor. As long as I hold onto my ill-gotten wealth and land, I'm the oppressor. I've got nothing, a white person has got nothing to do with a black struggle. We are just creating and reinforcing an oppressive, structurally racist system. So not for 1 minute, we cannot engage as unequal partners. So until we see land returned unconditionally in this country and ill-gotten wealth returned, I do not believe that reconciliation is something that we should value. In fact, as I said earlier in the interview, it's delaying black liberation. And I used to think, why, maybe there was just a compromise and it was done on naivety of the ANC. But my perspective now is it was deliberate. The objective was to keep white power intact in a post-democratic South Africa.
Do you think there's a return of the spy network of the old day, and it's operating in this government? I have a view. There is no way that spies just disappear, or that the security cluster, the old security machination, just ceases to exist. Of course, they had left, or they'd find alternative responsibilities in South Africa. But there is a murmuring from a part of our society saying the old deal, white guard, security machination, the old spy network might still be operational. What are your views of that?
I think that they never left, actually. Perhaps the only president who ever challenged them was Jacob Zuma, and that could be a reason for him being so villainized. So, I mean, we have de Kock and all these murderers and all these dreadful apartheid leaders still being treated like royals in our society. So are we naive enough to think that the spy networks were broken down? The spy networks have continued, unabated by a so-called black government, actually, in my perspective.
Do you envision a day, my last question to you, we'll talk to you all night, do you envision a day when South Africa has an independent media, when South Africa has media that is transformed, media that is not biased, particularly media that is not entrenched, media that does not take its creed and its instruction from white capital, when journalists are no longer on the Tuma Mina WhatsApp group? Do you envision that day?
I think it's only going to happen when black people fully embrace the damage that apartheid and colonialism has done. And I say one of the solutions I would do if I was president of this country is to ensure that Steve Biko's work is taught to every single South African, so that there's a national consciousness of black consciousness. Without that, nothing is going to change. White power will remain.
And the few leaders and the few writers and speakers who are liberated will find deep oppression from the cause, from the structure, from the system. Media owners such as Dr. Iqbal Survey,
yes.
For instance, will find deep hate and antagonism from the system, because he's transforming an industry that white people wanted to own and own to the means of production for themselves eternally.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And we have a system where unless we own the ideas and we own the minds, well, the system will continue. And I often think that the problem in this country is not only that white people occupy the land, but it's almost like the black mind is occupied by whiteness, and that has to change.
Yeah, Kim Helle, thank you for this time. We pray for your safety, man. So that you continue to write and you continue to say these things. Really liberating, indeed. Kim's book is called No White Lies, Black Politics and White Power in South Africa. Follow Kim Helle, or Kim Kune Helle, titled herself with the surname of Itumeleng Kune, former Chiefs goalkeeper. It's been an interesting conversation indeed. The Zondo Commission, Black Lies and White Power, the politics of our time, and real media freedom, and real liberated media, real media that is transformed. This conversation doesn't need to end here. Let's treat this interview, cut it, share it. Let's have these conversations on the Twitter streets, and and bring liberation to to South Africa. My name is Sifiso Mahlangu. Thank you for joining me in this interview. Until we sit again, this is Polotiki live on Channel 500. From me to you, good evening.